In this question, we're asked to identify which of the following quadrilaterals meet each of the criteria given. So the diagonals of the parallelogram are perpendicular to one another. That's going to be true for all rhombi. Well, a square is a rhombus as well. And a kite also has diagonals that are perpendicular to each other. Now, because the question asks for parallelogram, we can remove kite from the option. Consecutive angles of this quadrilateral are congruent. That happens with a rectangle. They're all 90 degrees, which is also true for a square. Consecutive sides of this parallelogram are perpendicular. Again, consecutive sides being perpendicular happens for a rectangle, so it will happen for a square as well. And then finally, opposite sides of this parallelogram are congruent. That's true for all parallelograms. So a rhombus, a rectangle, and a square are all parallelograms, therefore those will be true for them. When I hit submit, I can verify my answers. In this variation, we see a question: the diagonals of this quadrilateral are perpendicular to each other. So now it's just specifying the quadrilateral and not a parallelogram, so that fits a kite as well. A square and a rhombus will also have perpendicular diagonals. The diagonals of this parallelogram are perpendicular to each other. Now it's specific to a parallelogram, so a rhombus and a square will work, but even though a kite has perpendicular diagonals, it's not a parallelogram, so it won't fit in this question. Consecutive angles of this quadrilateral are congruent. That happens when you're dealing with a rectangle. A square is also a rectangle, so that works. And consecutive angles of this quadrilateral are supplementary. That's going to be true for any parallelogram, so that fits a rectangle, a rhombus, and a square. And again, for a trapezoid, not every consecutive pair of angles is supplementary, but select ones will be. In this problem, we're asked to identify which figures are diagonals of this quadrilateral are perpendicular to each other. So now it's specific to, or general to, a quadrilateral. So the quadrilaterals that have perpendicular diagonals are rhombus, so a square fits under that category, but also a kite. Consecutive sides of this parallelogram are perpendicular to each other. That's true for a rectangle, and a square is also a rectangle. The diagonals of this parallelogram are perpendicular bisectors of each other. Again, this time it's specific to parallelograms with perpendicular bisectors, so that's only going to be true for a rhombus and a square. And then finally, each diagonal of this parallelogram is a line of reflective symmetry, so that's true for a rhombus, and a square is also a rhombus, and so it would be true for those. One diagonal of a kite is a line of reflective symmetry, but it's not a parallelogram, so those would be our only solutions.